Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bridging the Divide, the impact of a unified block and file solution in modern data centers. Today's webinar is sponsored by Pure Storage and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, as you might have gathered, and I'm truly excited to be your moderator for this special event. But before we get to today's great content, and I promise you it will be great, we do have a few housekeeping items that I hope you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you. So we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation to discuss some of the top questions that you ask. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. First thing you want to do if that happens is a browser refresh. So try that, which will fix most audio, video, slide advancement issues. If that doesn't work, though, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find a metric ton of resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to the wealth of downloads we've got for you today from Pure Storage. They include a blog post on unified block and file storage, a link to the unified block and file storage product page, a link to a video overview of how it all works, and a white paper on the economic benefits of Pure Storage flash array for unified block and file storage. And that is a lot of goodness from Pure Storage. I encourage you to look those over and download them now. The handouts tab is right next to that questions tab in your control panel. All right, also in the handouts tab, you'll find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can access our huge library of books on technology topics. Also there, you'll find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events, including some really cool ones later this week. So check those out and sign up today if you see something that interests you. All right. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize, and the official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. If you really like to read boring, dry stuff, that is something you're going to want to check out. Okay, up next. One of the top reasons for being at an Actual Tech Media event is the opportunity to ask questions of these true experts. So to encourage those questions, we have an additional prize for you today, and that is a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question. So after the event's over, we'll look at all the questions that came in. We'll pick the best one that came in, and we will contact that prize winner and get you your gift card. All right, time for the good stuff. Now that I've been through all the boring stuff, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today, Chris Wynn, the Director of Product Marketing, and Don Porman, Technical Product Marketing Manager, both with Pure Storage. Chris and Don, so good to see you. It looks like you're ready to go. So, Chris, I am going to turn it over to you now. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Keith. It's great to be here, and thank you all for joining us today. As Keith mentioned, my name is Chris Wynn. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Flash Array at Pure Storage, and I'm joined here with Don Porman.
Hey, good afternoon.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started. So as Keith mentioned, we're here to talk to you a little bit about modern unified block and file and what that really means, and how some of the approaches to this date, like the bolted on approaches, are a bit antiquated. Before we get started, why don't we just do a quick round of introductions? Don, why don't you go ahead and start off?
Yeah, my name is Don Porman, as you can see there. I'm going to be the future winner of the $250 gift card, I'm assuming, Keith, right? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so I'm Technical Marketing Manager at Pure Storage. I've been at Pure for a little over a year now, but been doing storage, enterprise storage for that matter, since the late 90s. So I worked my way through Sun Microsystems, did some time on the VMware side, worked at EMC for about 9 years, spent some time at Nutanix, and now I'm at Pure. helping guide the ship through what software-defined storage and what our next evolution looks like too. So really excited to talk today about the unified storage value that Pure brings to its flash array portfolio.
Great. Thank you, Don. And I don't have an extensive background in storage like Don does, but I have over 20 years in the industry and software. I've been at companies such as TIPCO Software, BEA Systems, Adobe, and Salesforce. But glad to be here talking to you all. So why are people unifying block and file storage? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Data is growing by over 13% year over year. And on top of that, file or unstructured data is growing by 30%. The challenge with this, however, is that IT budgets are not growing in the same speed. And so a lot of what IT data centers are trying to achieve is trying to unify that to drive operational gains, right? And not only are we seeing data increasing because of humans creating data, but we're starting to see more AI types of platforms creating this data. And the more they do so, the more data that's going to be created and the more of a mess that we're going to have to deal with from a data center perspective. We're also seeing the richness of data is also getting more immersive, more rich. And so that only adds to the data growth as well. So it says here, 70% of organizations have tried to unify block and file, but most of them aren't happy. So let's dive in to why that's the case. So Don, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk with this nirvana of an ideal enterprise storage world with a little bit of a history first. Is if you think about enterprise storage in the form of storage area networks or network attached storage or something along those lines, those were brought about in a period of time when supporting compute was a very single purpose type of thing, whether you were supporting a mainframe or you were supporting a mini computer or something along those lines. The legacy storage that came about in those days was used to just supporting a single monolithic workload. And obviously things have changed quite a bit over time to where we are today, where we're all trying to figure out hybrid cloud as well as what the next generation of on-prem stuff looks like. And one of the things I think that's important regarding this evolution is this talk of a modern data storage platform is kind of drifting away from that idea of being single purpose. If you look at, again, at legacy storage, there's a lot of single-mindedness as it relates to how it functions inside of the data center. And modern data storage platforms need to be more dynamic. There has to be some simplicity behind how it's managed because we don't really have a lot of storage specialists anymore. We need to be able to provide some API capabilities for integration and automation because we don't want people pulling the levers all the time. As you can see, automation in cloud brings about a lot of capabilities to grow out your workloads in ways you never thought of before. And if you're still working with on-prem types of storage, we want to abstract the software relationship from the hardware underneath, in that the physical hardware should be able to be upgraded or changed while the software still services the workload that's coming across the SAN or through the NAS or something like that. And easy and transparent software upgrades obviously should be table stakes as well. And I think, again, the challenge that legacy storage has with regards to these kinds of ideas is that they still have a tendency to be very hardware centric. If you read the press announcements that come out from legacy providers, a lot of it has to do with better performing hardware and better capabilities as it relates to the underlying physical parts. And it's really the software that makes the difference as far as being able to modernize and go into this modern data storage world. So as we talk a little bit about Pure, you're going to start to see that we really lean in on the storage or on the software side of things, that the hardware that we have, while it's amazing, is just an enabler for where our software is going. So what does that really mean as far as when legacy providers got faced with this idea of multi-protocol architectures back in the day? What did they do? Well, if you look at EMC, they were a block-based company that added file on top of things, and Network Appliance, NetApp, it took file and put block on top of it. And they called that unified when it was really federated, because at the end of the day, it was still a hardware-oriented type of ecosystem. So granularities were different between what a file environment wanted versus a block. The management model grew more complex because they didn't really do a lot of work to merge the interfaces together of block and file. And ultimately, everything still revolved around hardware, from the perspective that if you had a legacy or an existing array that needed to be refreshed, the only way that you could get your data from the old array to the new array was forklift everything from one to the other. Now, whether you did it via copying over the network or if you use protection groups with synchronous replication, at the end of the day, the entire ecosystem was still hardware driven. And the challenge behind that bolt-on idea of adding a protocol on top of another protocol is that it may solve your CapEx challenges out of the gate initially, but the complexity of trying to manage both of them at the same time really didn't go away. So in turn, what you really did is you had your block storage specialist and your network storage specialist suddenly working together on the same array, but they still had the same steps. They still had the wonky hardware stuff that they had to deal with. And even though they called it, a multi-protocol type of thing, it was still federated. And they didn't really break out of what I believe were single-use cases. So while there may have been some, immediate benefit to them being able to do the bolt-on thing, it's proven over time that unified really needs to be reinvented in order for real benefit to come out of what your storage ecosystem is about. So from a consolidation perspective, I think the other challenge is these are technologies that were invented in the 80s and the 90s. So they continue to be black boxes that have gotten more and more complicated over time. The last era architecture is true that some are still just catching up to what flash architecture can do inside of storage, as well as thinking about the older software that works those arrays, the kernels and the operating systems themselves. They're based on older operating systems that are kind of stuck in their ways as it relates to flexibility and things like that. That's why you end up with the challenge of slow or no innovation, because if you're using an operating system on your platform that's, say, 30, 40 years old, the flexibility isn't going to be as prevalent as it might be if you use something that's more modern. So looking at legacy storage, as it relates to how it's managed and what it looks like in the environment, this blue box is a really good example of the things that you would normally do in a legacy environment if you needed to provision block and file protocol-based workloads next to each other. You'd start at the very basics, which is put your hard disks into certain groups. You'd set the RAID type for that group. You'd add it to a pool if you needed to aggregate the groups into a bigger amount of storage that you wanted to present to the volume. And then that volume was served up to the host, and it was used for either files or virtual machines or block if you were using a database that was talking directly to it. But if you look at that blue box, I think the interesting thing is that's two separate swim lanes for two separate protocols that involve the same type of complicated way of provisioning the storage upstream to the hosts themselves. Again, this is the challenge of having bolt-on things done to an array, whether you're bolting file onto block or block onto file. Those functions are still irrespective of each other. They don't know each other exists. So the only way you can keep them in separate camps or get them working together, quite honestly, is at the hard disk level. And even then, you don't have an architecture with legacy thinking that allows the file side of the house to work with the block side of the house on the same set of underlying storage, like physical storage pieces themselves. And that's where we're a lot different with Pure, that we announced unified storage back in April. And when we say it's truly unified, what we mean is that we've not bolted anything on. While FlashArray was traditionally a block-oriented platform, when we introduced files to it, we actually made files a peer service to block as well. So if you look at the orange box on the right, you can see that files and block, they are both pure, they're both peer services that share the global storage pool of all flash underneath. We don't have to partition hard drives and starve the files side of things because we need more block or vice versa. The entire concept of the shared underpinnings of the array really does matter as it relates to a few things. First off, it allows a single unified interface, and we'll get into the demo on that in a little bit, a unified interface to allow provisioning both services on either side by whomever you wish. And the global storage pool allows for a lot more efficiencies between the two services as it relates to our data reduction capabilities and some of the other things that are in there that we'll talk about in a little bit. So when we talk about, again, unified block and platform from Pure's FlashArray side, we're talking a native unified architecture, meaning block and file are together in the same level in the Purity storage operating system, and they both share the underlying physical resources from the direct flash modules that we have, all the way up through to where their services deliver out onto the protocols on the network itself. The best part about this is because they are unified, we can unify policy management as well. And as you'll see over time, we are planning on evolving our services inside of Purity to allow for better integration into the hybrid cloud challenges that are out there. And the best part is that our goal is if you can manage it on-prem, you can manage it in the cloud, all from the Pure ecosystem itself. So unified to us, again, to summarize real quickly, is the idea that block and file exist as equals on the storage array, and it's all provisioned from the same interface, and underneath of it, we share the same storage resources, the actual physical direct flash modules themselves. One of the things that I mentioned was the advantage that we gain by having these services operate in a unified way allows them to take full advantage of some of the efficiencies that we gain out of Purity. Right here is a great example of what you can expect, that if Purity FA is the storage operating system itself and has all of these advantages, always on encryption, ransomware remediation through snapshot, safe mode snapshots, high availability, data reduction, because we're unified all on top of Purity FA as the storage operating system, we now are able to share things between file and block in ways that others can't. Think about this. If we have block storage that's provisioned upstream to VMware hosts, and we have file storage that's provisioned out to other end clients, the data reduction of block benefits file and vice versa. In legacy storage, those would not see each other and you'd not be able to do that. But the advantage we gain here is since we have industry-leading data reduction technology, we can let both benefit from each other in this unified way. And you see a significant data reduction because of it. We did an ESG paper for the launch, and ESG estimated that with files operating in tandem with block, it was about a 10x reduction as far as data reduction was considered. I was surprised at it, but they showed me the numbers and it did work. So Chris, that's basically what we've got going on as far as unified is concerned. The idea is one array to rule them all if you want to do a Hobbit type of thing. But I'm going to flip over to the demo and show you how simple it is to really take a look at how it works in our environment.
Sounds good, John.
So if you can see my screen here, we've got the Pure Test Drive. By the way, this is a subtle little commercial for everybody that if you go to purestorage.com and search for Test Drive, we have virtual testing labs for all of our stuff out there. So you can request a 2-hour lab that you can go through and use your guide to get through whatever you want to test and kick around. But for those who've not seen what our interface looks like, this is really what the pure flash array interface looks like. It's HTML5 based, very clean, very straightforward, one click away from everything you need to do inside of the array. But the more important part is to see under the storage part of all this, where we do all of our configuration and setting up of policies, you can see that volumes, which represent block-oriented storage targets, sits right next to file systems as well. And under volumes, obviously we can create as many volumes as we want, attach them to hosts, and do all of the things that we need to do for block-based storage, but file systems is the same way. So we have the ability to create a file system. Let's call this one file sys. That's very clever. We're going to make it a part of the files pod. I'll talk a little bit about that. And just like that, we've created a file system that can now have exports made for SMB and NFS out over your storage network. The advantage that you gain from this that we've talked about is that the policies are applicable across the board for everything from protection groups into pods, as well as into the disaster recovery capabilities that we have, being able to replicate from a primary array to a secondary array. And again, what you're seeing here obviously is Purity FA, the storage operating system, reflecting what those configurations are. File systems, again, real quickly, we've talked about the directories that get created, and then we can do directory exports right from here in the same array that we're delivering fiber channel or NVMe over TCP types of things. But the directory exports, like I said, support SMB, NFS, and you can even do cross protocol shares. So you can attach via NFS or SMB to the same directory export. One of the advantages too that we brought with us as we announced Unified was support for VMware data stores over NFS 3 and 4.1, which expands our capability to provide a multi-dimensional tool to VMware administrators upstream to be able to have an easier time of working and managing their data stores. We've got a plugin, obviously, for vCenter. We do VAI. We've got VASA. And one of the advantages that we put into supporting VMware data stores over NFS is this concept of managed directories. So if we have an NFS-based data store, every virtual machine that's provisioned through the plugin gets its own managed directory, allowing us the ability to bring per VM granularity to snapshots and recovery, which isn't something that you see in NFS data stores and other providers. If you snapshot an entire data store and you recover it, you have to recover everything. Whereas if we're using managed directories for one-off, one-at-a-time VMs, we can bring them back one at a time with the snapshots themselves. I wish I had more time to talk to you a little bit about the disaster recovery and business continuity of all of this stuff, but the other advantage that we gain here is that if you're familiar with the interface for block with flash array, you'll be very familiar with it as it relates to file as well. So that's the demo. Real quickly, I want to talk a little bit about how the ecosystem really works from a reality perspective when it comes to buying it and working with the hardware as well. One of the things that we have with all of our ecosystem is this concept of evergreen, which is the ability to purchase storage as a service, or what you would call a cloud consumption model for buying our storage, not just hardware, but the software itself. And we've got 3 different types of evergreen subscriptions. You could do SLA driven storage as a service. You could buy the hardware and then do capacity-based subscription for the Purity FA stuff. And then the evergreen forever is buy it once, use it forever. One of the advantages to that is as you get hardware refreshes, we come in and we refresh the controllers or the direct flash modules or the things that have advanced when the platform advances. And that's really where I'm heading here on this, is that I talked about how legacy storage is very built around the concept of hardware being the most important part of storage. And we agree that hardware has something to do with on-prem. We've got amazing density with our direct flash modules. But one of the things that our software enables us to do is this concept of non-disruptive upgrades, which is the ability to move from refreshed platform to refreshed platform without any outages, disconnecting volumes, disconnecting hosts from the storage network itself, and replacing the actual hardware pieces in flight themselves. That's not something many other legacy vendors can even get close to claiming. Now, granted, you're still going to want to do this kind of stuff in maintenance windows, I'm sure you do, but the idea of being able to refresh from an older array to a newer array is really where we get that concept of no more forklift upgrades, that we can upgrade the chassis that's in place and give you the new controllers and the new DFMs without the outages themselves. That's unique for us, there's no doubt. So again, you kind of summarize where I'm going with all of this is that a storage platform is definitely a lot more software driven than the physical component, even though it's important to us. And our software, as we evolve as a company, is going to continue to get more capable of not just taking advantage of the hardware that we have, but also with a lot of the public cloud providers that we're partnering with as well. So that's what I've got, Chris. I'll turn it over to you. You can chat up the other pieces.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. And, we encourage you to go to purestorage.com and take a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant that was just released a few weeks ago. For 10 consecutive years, Pure Storage has been listed as a leader on the primary storage Gartner Magic Quadrant. And for the 4th consecutive year, Pure Storage is the most furthest to the right and to the top in terms of completeness of vision and ability to execute. So please, I encourage you to go to purestorage.com, take a look at that. And if you don't believe us, believe Gartner. Also, as Don alluded to earlier as well, during the launch of Unified Block and File, we had a report that was written by ESG, and they came out with an estimate of 58 TCO reduction. So across both reducing CapEx and OpEx, a lot of what Don spoke to in terms of eliminating the storage silos and getting better utilization rates, but also, again, just hammering home the whole notion of non-disruptive upgrades and getting rid of forklift upgrades. So I encourage you to please scan this QR code here if you'd like to learn more about it. But Keith, I see there's a number of questions that have come in, and I'll turn it over to you to guide us through the Q&A.
Excellent. What a great presentation. Both you, Chris and Don. Don, I have to give you a virtual high five and a thumbs up for your Hobbit reference. Anytime you can bring the Lord of the Rings into an event, it immediately makes that event better. So
I should have put a quiz out there or something like that. That shows I'm a true nerd if I do a Hobbit reference.
And I'm just as nerdy. Absolutely. Okay, you had talked about questions. I tell you what, let's go through that. In the meantime, I'm going to put up the previous slide because I want them to see that QR code that they can still get. Let's leave that up a little bit longer and give everyone a chance to scan that QR code. Excuse me, while we dive in. Okay, first question for you today, Don. How is Unified priced? And this is someone who asked because they have a flash array that's already delivering block storage.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Best part about it is that Unified is considered an included service with flash array inside of Purity. So all you really need to do if you have an existing flash array is get the file services turned on. And once it's on, you're able to deliver as much as you want as far as SMB and NFS exports are concerned.
Yeah, just to quickly add to that, simply file a support ticket and the support team will help you turn it on.
Good to hear. Okay, next up, is there a noisy neighbor performance risk of running block and file side by side? And let me ask you first for those who are not aware, to just define what you mean by a noisy neighbor in this context.
Sure. It's a common thing in multi-tenant environments or service providers where the infrastructure is shared that somebody may have processes that go out of control or unexpected usage that goes out of control that may, horn in on hogging all of the resources of the array in sacrifice of the other services that are also trying to get a seat at the table. And I've had that question in the field before a couple of times. Hey, how do you make sure that files and block don't overpower each other and take on all the resources? There's a lot of system management daemons that are loaded behind the scenes that ensure that kind of thing. I would say, though, in the best part of Pure is that we've automated that. So we've made it transparent, and the fact that you can't see it as an end user is a good thing. Just know that there is a balance that occurs between the two.
Very nice. Yeah, having that automated is really clutch here. Okay, next up for you. How does FlashArray handle business continuity to an alternate location with block and file services? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So business continuity, obviously, if you're going to put enterprise storage in, that's a big deal. Block and file are a little bit different as it relates to our ability to fail over from a primary to an alternate. Block has a lot more options simply because it's been on the array a lot longer than unified. Right now with block, we have the ability to do synchronous replication through the form of active cluster or active DR, which is async. So the ability to send things on a regular basis to your alternate and then promote the secondary to primary and things along those lines. That's for block, so synchronous and asynchronous. For file, right now we only have asynchronous, which is the ability to every 15 minutes, soon to be 5, take a snapshot of the file system structure and replicate it to an alternate location. And over time, you're going to see that become a lot closer to block as far as synchronous and things along those lines is concerned. So for now, 15-minute asynchronous type of option with files and next to no RTO, RPO with synchronous replication on the block side, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. With 5 minutes on the way, you say?
Yeah, 5 minutes is on the way.
Okay, great. Okay, another question. Lewis wants to know, what is an example of forklift? So I assume you
saw that.
Forklift upgrade.
Yeah, I saw that. It's my favorite one. So I'll give you a really good example. When I was DMC, I worked with service providers, and there was a service provider who was squeezing the last death gasps out of an array that was long been retired. And even then it was, a couple of 100 terabytes of most of storage. But when they did buy the new one, it was tough because they had to take that 500 terabytes or so and move it to the other array itself. Now, because the array was older, there was no compatibility for being able to do synchronous replication between the two or anything. So there had to be this heavy lift of volumes and file shares from the old array to the new array. Now, 500 terabytes over, let's say, a 10 gigabit network, that's going to take a while, and you're going to hope that it doesn't fail out on you halfway through and that you grabbed everything to the new array before you turn the old one off. So that's a perfect example of a forklift array, meaning my old array's got a lot of data on it. I need to move it to my new array. And by the way, while we're doing that, not only are you paying somebody to move the data, but you're also paying for maintenance on both of your arrays at the same time, which bring in a whole bunch of financial challenges with depreciation. And if you're lucky to have the rack space and the power to support the other array that you're migrating to, that's a real challenge out there in the data center. So the lack of forklift upgrade is a real big benefit to our non-disruptive upgrades.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. Okay, Paul wants to know, up next, how does Pure Storage minimize the setup complexity and configuration issues that accompany some unified block and file solutions?
Interesting. Well, without clarifying, I don't know if it's a protocol challenge or if the complexity is trying to manage the physical resources underneath. Like I said earlier, if you use a legacy provider that may have a bolted block on top of file as far as what they call unified storage. Those two services are, they don't know each other exists basically, and both think they are the only service accessing the actual physical storage underneath, which means you have to provide some hard provisioning at the lowest level to say, look, these disks, these volumes are dedicated to file, these disks, these volumes are dedicated to block. And the challenge that you have with that, and hopefully I'm nailing this answer for you, Paul, is if you have some unexpected growth on the file side that consumes the storage that you've allocated for it and you run out of it, you can't easily take it away from the block and move it over. And I've actually had that happen to me too before, where you have to, with legacy, with the way bolted on sees those independent views, you actually have to anticipate your consumption at the beginning when you provision your array and allow two different swimlings to grow independently of each other, meaning block and file. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I've seen with bolt-on managing. Protocol stuff, that can be challenging too, depending upon if you have a lot of network interfaces or if you don't. We ship Pure Flash Array with more interfaces than you know what to do with, so there are always extra ports for being able to deliver the file level stuff as well as the block level stuff.
Great. Okay. Chun Tita has an interesting question. Does flex licensing allow us to surpass service storage capacity subscription limits without impacting service delivery? It says such as service degradation. So would that have that effect?
So that's a question related to the Evergreen Flex. I'd like to take a note on that one and get the answer on that and send it out if we could, because I don't, unless you, Chris, know the details of Evergreen Flex, I'd like to be able to answer that with the right answer.
Yeah, I think to give a definitive answer, why don't we circle back on that with Tita on that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yep. Great. So you will be hearing from Pure Storage on that particular question, Chuntita. And let's ask another one then. Glad to see all of this interest in your solution today. I love all of these questions. Another one, can we select? Yeah, absolutely. Can we select?
Go ahead, Keith.
Can we select specific file structures for snapshot or replication between arrays, or does it apply to entire arrays?
Great question. Yes, you can do specific file structures. So when you saw that I created a file system there in my demo, you have the ability to add it to what we call a pod, which is really just an object flag that enables it to take part in protection groups. So you can do it by the file system level. You also can get granular enough to go all the way down to the managed directory level if you want. So it's not just the whole file structure can be snapshot and moved. We can also just do specific managed directories. Or you could do both with two separate policies, quite honestly, and have them go in different directions. That's the advantage that we gain from leveraging the flash array FA purity stuff with files itself. We were able to do that with block, and we're able to do that with files.
Okay, great. Couple of quick little updates while we're here. Number one, I think I can feel confident in saying, and Don and Chris, you can back me up, that any questions we don't get to today that are relevant, that Pure will follow up with everyone who is asking a question. So no worries there. Don't fear that you won't get your question won't get answered. Number two, I want to remind everyone of all of these handouts in the handouts tab that I referenced at the beginning. There's 4 different handouts, and they may answer some additional questions that you have also on the Pure solution. So make sure you're downloading those before the end of the event today. So, okay, let's get on to the next one here. Israel wants to know, what exactly are the innovative strategies that can be employed to seamlessly integrate and optimize a unified block and file solution that addresses both performance and scalability?
Woo! That's a big one. I like that question. It's complicated.
Yes.
I should do that too. I should do the usual SE answer, which, well, it's complicated.
It depends.
Actually, this is a very good question. So, performance and scalability, as well as larger level and analytical performance type of stuff, while there is some in the flash array interface, this is a chance for me to do a Pure One advertisement. So, we have a fleet management type of ecosystem called Pure One that you're able to take telemetry data from your array, feed it into Pure One, and over time, Pure One will use machine learning to get a unique view of how you use your data in your environment, and then provide you insight into where data may be moved to make things better, or if you've got hotspots, things along those lines. So while the analysis of what comes up in the FA interface that you saw earlier is good for maybe point in time or maybe the last few weeks kind of thing, the bigger picture stuff that you're asking about, Israel, would be more along the lines of Pure One, which I don't know if we put a link in all the supported stuff for Pure One, but definitely look at Pure One for answers to that question.
Great, great. Okay, next up, we got time for a couple of more here. Is there any self-service function available for users to manage all aspects of new storage requests, provisions, data sharing, including full disablement?
Roadmap. It's on the roadmap. Actually, I'm on the roadmap calls every week, and this is like the #1 priority is self-service and multi-tenancy are the two big ones up there. So yes, it will eventually be there, and it is on the roadmap.
So sit tight on those. To be continued, right? Okay. Okay, I think we have time for one more here, and this is our AI and HPC optimal use cases for unified block and file solutions like Pure, or are less compute-intensive applications a good fit as well?
So that's a great question, Paul, and we do have an answer for you at Pure Storage. So we're talking flash array, which for us is what we would call a scale-up solution, meaning we don't add any controllers to the mix. We just add disk for capacity until it reaches a certain limit. That's flash array. It's a more traditional storage array, if you will, but we also have FlashBlade, which is a complementary storage platform to flash array, and FlashBlade is scale out. So I came from Nutanix, which is great. The idea of scale out is as you add nodes, you add controllers, which makes their throughput, latency, and everything else get faster and faster, which is perfect for AI and HPC oriented workloads. So the good part is you're still going to be dealing with Purity, you're still going to be dealing with Pure Storage, you're still going to be dealing with Pure One in that equation. It just may be a different physical platform in the form of FlashBlade to support AI and HPC, but it's well within our capabilities.
Got you. Great stuff. Great stuff. Okay, well, I think we are going to have to leave it there, folks. Chris and Don, thank you so much for this presentation. I love the demo. Thanks so much for sticking around for a really fun Q&A session. Love all the questions from everyone. Love seeing the attendees' interest in what you're doing now. And thanks for being here with us today. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
You bet. All right, and with that, folks, we are close to the end here. We do have one more piece of business to take care of, however, and that is our Amazon gift card prize drawing. This is the big one, $250 for the event. As I mentioned at the beginning, you do have to be present for the entire event for any of our prize drawings for our events. So the winner of the $250 Amazon card for today is Ralph Nanis from California. Congratulations to you, Ralph. And we will be in touch with you ASAP to get you your card. And with that, everyone, we're done here. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Pure Storage for making this event possible. I want to thank Chris and Don again for their efforts today and for the knowledge that they dropped on all of us. I want to thank all of you for attending, for your great questions, and for spending part of your afternoon with us. You're the reason we do this, and it was a pleasure to be here with you. Well, everyone, that concludes today's event. You can get back to whatever you're doing and have a great rest of your day.